So if this isn't your cup of tea and you slip out at any time, that's okay. How many of you are parents? Good. This will be very good. You'll get a lot out of understanding. How many of you are teachers? How many of you want to understand more what these tests are about? How many of you are here to learn how to identify kids through group measures in a public school? Please go to Gifted Girls Next Door. I'm not going to talk about that. No, that's not what I want to talk about because I'm a psychologist and I seem to have misplaced my clicker. Oh dear. Clicker. Talk amongst yourselves.
She was in Windsor. Oh, she was in this room.
I got everything but the one little piece of equipment I need. Oh, I bet I need this too, so you can hear me. I'll turn that off until I'm ready. I can edit that out. What did I do with the clicker?
You talking all look.
Is it on the center?
Then I would have to hand forward things. That's my list. Oh, I bet I can do that.
I can sit here and sit for you.
Success. All right, so now we've wasted 3 minutes of this presentation. Okay, so how many of you have issues with IQ tests? You really don't like them? Okay. Now, IQ tests were not designed to measure everything. And obviously, this girl can't have all her skills measured by an IQ test, but that doesn't mean they're not valuable. And they have, it's camp in the press, in your courses in graduate school, to knock IQ tests and pretend that they're not valuable. Well, guess what, folks? They're wrong. They are valuable. And one of the people who made them, put them on the map and made them the most valuable thing you could do with gifted kids to find out who you got and what their strengths and weaknesses are, was Lita Hollingworth. Nebraska's own Lita Hollingworth. So this is one of the things that you need to take into account when you diss IQ tests. This is important. The more widely mental tests are used, the more certainly does it appear that general intelligence is distributed regardless of sex. Until recently, the intellectual inferiority of girls was assumed. Mental tests proved the existence of gifted girls. Mental tests are continuing to prove the existence of gifted girls. The people who have mounted the campaign to kill the IQ tests were eminent men. Remember that. I thought I would start with just getting you tantalized in looking at an actual profile to see what it looks like. So this is a record form from, hello, turning it on is such a good idea. Sorry about that. You'll hear me better. Okay. This is a profile from a Wechsler Intelligence Scale for Children, 4th edition. And how many of you have seen a WISC-4 profile? This is familiar. You ever wondered about it, what all that stuff means? So it's broken into 4 parts, and we're going to talk more about what each of those parts are. And let's look at this one kid's profile. Can you see this in the back? Tim, can you read it? What are you picking up? What would you tell me if you saw a profile like that of a child? What would it say to you? What does that communicate to you? Tell me what it says. What interpretation do you make of it? Needs a lot of time to think. This kid needs a lot of time to think. Bingo. A+ for the course. What else do you know about this kid? What is this test telling you?
If you talk to them, they'll learn.
Didn't hear that.
If you talk to them, they'll learn. they hear it, they'll learn.
If you talk to him,
Well,
he'll
they'll
learn.
talk, but if they hear it,
If he hears it, he'll learn. Okay, that was a very astute observation. Where did you come up with that? Just from a bunch of scores?
verbal comprehension.
His verbal comprehension is really high. So this is a kid who's going to respond to verbal learning. But there's more to it. What else does that tell you? What else do you know? Just from looking at the one profile. I've got more of these in the second half of our session. After we take the break, we're going to go over actual profiles like this. Yes?
He hit the ceiling on the verbal and two
Okay, very good. He hit the ceiling on 2 of the verbal tests. Those 2 are similarities and vocabulary. Those are very important subtests because they are the most richly loaded on the measure of general intelligence. So the fact that he hit the ceiling means he could be smarter than this particular test measures, right? Okay, what else do you see? Those are excellent observations. Yes?
It's like some visual perceptual difficulties on the left
You
side.
better believe it. I want you testing my kid. Yes.
Repeat that, Linda.
This child has a visual perceptual weakness. And how do you know that?
Well, I know the test and I know that the block design measure requires a lot of visual perceptual skill to manipulate the blocks to look like the picture on the.
Well, she's a psychologist. She tests kids. She knows that the block design requires a whole lot of visual perceptual reasoning to put those blocks together to match the pattern. And she knows enough about testing to know that there shouldn't be this big drop between matrix reasoning and block design, because that drop in block design is supposed to be measuring approximately the same visual spatial skills as matrix reasoning. So she wants to know, as any good psychologist would, why is block design 5 points lower than matrix reasoning? Because it shouldn't be, unless something is interfering with the kid's performance. What is the likely culprit to be interfering? Is it lack of visual spatial ability? No, it can't be that. If it was lack of visual spatial ability, he wouldn't have been able to get such a high matrix reasoning score. Is it lack of general intelligence? No, it can't be that, because otherwise his similarities, vocabulary, comprehension, and matrix reasoning wouldn't all be in the gifted and highly gifted ranges. Those are all measures of general intelligence. There's only one thing left: visual processing. And we have additional proof that visual processing is weak. What's our other proof?
Processing speed.
Processing speed. Look at those low processing speed scores. The first one and the third one, verbal comprehension, working memory, are auditorily presented. The perceptual reasoning and the processing speed are visually presented. Having a background in special ed really helped me to be able to analyze these things through modalities: auditory, visual. And this is what I would do with this child. I believe, as most psychologists do not, I believe in vision therapy. I've seen it make an enormous difference. And there's good vision therapists in Omaha. Thank you for nodding your head to tell me why.
Because I went to the Heartland Institute, and his wife and he do this kind of thing.
And it helped you.
No, I didn't need the help. They were explaining to me.
Oh, so you've talked to
I
people.
know that they are doing that, and I don't know that we are all aware of that sort of thing.
Yep, and you've got some good people here in Omaha who do it. This is a kid I would send for vision therapy. Anything else you picked up about this kid? Anything else you can tell me? Or take wild guesses. What have you got to lose? You're just being on film, so, yeah.
There's a large difference between the working memory and his highest score.
Okay, so not only are we looking at a kid with some visual issues, but why is the working memory so low? That's interesting, isn't it? His high scores are 19. That's his highest. And I look at the highs and lows, and I wonder, just like you do, why are there these big differences? We've got coding, which is 8, similarities and vocabulary, that's 19. That's a difference of 11 points. I think, did I add that, or subtract that right? So 11 points is almost 4 standard deviations. What does that mean? That's like the difference between a 130 IQ in verbal abstract reasoning and a 70 IQ or an 80 IQ in ability to get thoughts down on paper. Coding correlates with handwriting speed. So what else would that tell you then about what you want to do with a kid with a profile like this? What would help this kid? Typing, right. Put this kid on a keyboard. This child can never keep up with his mind. He needs a keyboard. But that's not the only thing going on with him. Something is interfering with auditory memory. If you got any ideas about what might have been depressing the scores, digit span is repeating digits forward, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and repeating digits backwards. And arithmetic is doing word problems in 30 seconds. Why would this kid be having trouble with that? What's your best guess? What do you think might be happening? Just any intuitive guess, yes?
He's too slow.
He's too slow.
To write the answers down, his processing speed is so slow, and if he only has 30 seconds, he might not have enough time to do.
He doesn't do any writing. Everything is presented to him auditorily, and he does mental math, and then he responds. But slow is part of the problem here. There's something else besides his handwriting speed and his general processing speed with visual material that's slow. Something else is slow. And you said it right from the beginning, Jeff. This is a kid who takes a long time to think about things, who's more reflective. In addition to that, his auditory system is not fully integrated. The information from his left ear and his right ear aren't synthesizing when they get into the nervous system. They're missing. So this is a kid who might say, what did the teacher say? What are we supposed to be doing? So he looks to me like he has visual issues, auditory issues, and sensory processing, which is a handwriting issue, and a processing speed issue. What do we call these really bright kids who have all these things going on? He's twice exceptional. This is a twice exceptional child. Okay, what's twice exceptional? Giftedness is showing in his verbal comprehension. Giftedness is showing in his picture concepts and matrix reasoning. And the difference between those scores and the low scores are more than 1.5 standard deviations. So they're more than what is typical. So this is a child who's twice exceptional. So let's talk a little bit about what are these issues that we're dealing with when we're trying to diagnose, and that's really what we're doing. We're not identifying kids for gifted programs per se. We're diagnosticians, and we're trying to look at strange patterns and be good detectives and find out why they're there. Well, there's a problem in being a diagnostician with gifted kids. That's because there are greater variations from instrument to instrument in the gifted population than in any other population. The tests, gifted kids are hitting the ceiling on most of the tests. And you're not really seeing just how high they can go, but there's also, there's a masking of the difficulties when they're there. So one of the big problems we have in selecting tests for gifted kids is hard enough items. That's called a test ceiling. If the ceiling of the test is too low, that kid isn't going to be able to show you the full strength of the abilities. Maximum scores could be too low. How many of you use the Ravens? Ravens progressive matrices. Have you heard of the Ravens? It's a great test, and it happens to be the test of choice for finding gifted children all over the world. It's a nonverbal test. And it's probably kind of close to what Jack Naglieri was trying to model the Naglieri nonverbal assessment instrument on. And the maximum score on the Ravens is 135. So the maximum score isn't high enough. Discrepancies among subtest scores are greater in the gifted range. The discontinue criteria are often too short. Now, what does this mean? People who give tests, examiners, have to stop when a child reaches a certain number that's prescribed, and it's different for each test and different for each subtest. So on one subtest, it might be 3 items. If a child misses 3 items in a row, you have to stop testing. Those are the rules. If you don't follow those rules, you're not adhering to the standardization of the test. But in more modern tests, they keep shortening the discontinue criteria. And the shorter you make them, the less likely you are to find your twice exceptional kids, because they very often can answer things after you have to stop administering them, or at least the test directions say you should. Now, highly gifted kids are likely to make things harder than they really are. You know, what does bear mean? Which bear are we talking about? And then there's this pregnant silence while the child complexifies and tries to imagine what you're talking about. They think items that are too easy are trick questions. I don't know if any of you have had to do this, but I can't tell you the number of times Bobby Gilman has had to say to the child, no, this is not a trick question. No, this really is solvable. This is not a trick question, because they think they're there. And average kids don't think that there are trick questions. That's a gifted problem. And environmental factors can have a stronger impact, because if you've got very high ability, but you can't deal with fluorescent lights, and you can't deal with loud music, and that's booming in the room next door, and you can't concentrate, your score could plummet by 30 points, where an average kid hasn't had that far down to go with those distractions. So here's my problem. This is why I'm doing this presentation. We are making high-stakes decisions about placement of gifted kids on group tests. We would not even think of doing this with children at the other end of the spectrum. What if the child can't read? What if the child can't track and can't even tell what line they're on? How are they going to show what they can do on a group test that's mainly a written test? This is a travesty. So if that's what you wanted me to talk about, that's all I'm going to say about group tests. In the diagnosis of giftedness, test scores become the definitive arbiters of children's qualifications for placement, often determining their futures. Don't you think we need to be paying more attention to what the scores mean? I have been in states, and this isn't one of them, where 130 you were gifted and placed in the gifted program, and 129 you were not gifted and you were not placed in the gifted program, and that was state law. It's like those legislators never heard of the standard error of measurement. They don't understand that the 129 could have been 135 the next day. This is standard practice. This is what is usually done, and it's what is taught in the training programs for psychologists. You are taught, give only the core subtests. Why? Because you are in a situation in a school setting where you have to get a whole bunch of kids through, and these kids have short attention spans, and see, that's all the time you're allotted. You only have enough time to just barely get through those core subtests. You are also taught to rely on those full-scale IQ scores as if they were God. compare the child to the norms in the book, report relative strengths, relative weaknesses, obey those discontinued criteria, strictly adhere to time limits, assume the results are valid. I'd like to have $1 for every report I've read that said, this is a valid estimate of this child's abilities. And I sit there and I say to the report, how do you know that? How could you know that? And be a blank slate. Can you imagine taking a test with a person who is talking in a monotone and not particularly interested in your answers, and that person's trying to be a blank slate because their professor told them that's what they... How on earth would any child relate to a blank slate? You have to be a human being relating to another human being. So when you're looking for giftedness, you do different things from the standard. In the WISC, you're allowed to make a priori substitutions. At the Gifted Development Center, the a priori, meaning before you test the kid, if you just give the kid all 15 subtests and then you pick the highest, you're not allowed to do that. But you can say at the beginning, before you test the kid, I'm using arithmetic. I'm using arithmetic because there are so many gifted kids who do well in arithmetic, and it's going to give me more information than just letter number sequencing. Derive general ability indexes. How many of you have heard the term GAI? GAI, you've got to know. If you're going to test gifted kids, those GAIs are more important than full scales. We'll talk more about what they are. Extended norms. How many of you knew there were extended norms for the WISC? Okay, you got to know about those. They're on the website, and WIPSI 4 extended norms are coming. Kim Boham from Omaha was one of the premier testers of a population of kids, very smart kids, on the WIPSI 4 that's generating these extended norms for that too. Be aware of G-loadings. That's how rich is this subtest on general intelligence. Understand what subtest score patterns look like in the gifted. Test the limits of the ability of the child, which means, oh, okay, you've done the standardized routine, ask them questions after the discontinue criteria. You can't count them. They're not part of the score, but you can test them, and you can write in your narrative, this kid would have had X IQ if we could have given credit for that. Note in your report if the discontinue criteria were reached or not, and report scores where kids go all the way to the top of the test without meeting a discontinue criterion as underestimates, and be enthusiastic. The kids respond to that. They're going to tell you and show you what they know if they know you care. Don't just sit there like a blob. All right, selecting subtests out of WISC 4. Arithmetic, information, and picture completion are 3 optional subtests that I would like to speak for because I think all of them are useful. You don't have time to give them all. So you have to take a look at which one for this kid is the one you want to add. Arithmetic, a given. And I'll give you all kinds of reasons why, but arithmetic is the one we give to everybody unless the child says, I hate mental math. That kid doesn't get arithmetic. Information has the highest extended norm score. Information is depressed in a child who's been sexually abused. And so it's diagnostically important information if you're looking for some other things. Picture completion is a gender-fair test of visual spatial abilities. It's more gender-fair than matrix reasoning or block design. So if you're testing a girl, you think she's got visual spatial talent, give her picture completion. Okay, working memory. These are, this is the part of the test where arithmetic is. Digit span and letter number sequencing are both non-meaningful tasks, clerical tasks that a lot of gifted kids find boring. Twice exceptional children may have brilliant abstract reasoning memory, but very poor working memory. Arithmetic is a better measure of working memory for gifted children unless they're math phobic. Now, about rapport building. With a gifted child, rapport building is so important. I know all of you have seen kids who just clammed up and you couldn't test them. Or you couldn't, if they were your child, your child couldn't be tested because the child wouldn't show what he or she knew with that tester. So it's essential and it's time consuming. I had the first person that I started the Gifted Development Center with had a child who would not answer any of the questions. So she took out a hand puppet and she had the hand puppet answer the questions. You would not believe how smart that hand puppet was. The hand puppet got 190 IQ.
Oh my God.
Guessing should be encouraged. We start out some sessions by saying, guess what I had for breakfast. And I'm going to guess what you had for breakfast. Because a lot of girls don't want to guess, and if you won't guess, you'll get a lower IQ score by not guessing. A child who is afraid of making a mistake can have a favorite toy or a puppet answer the questions. And how the evaluator feels about the child exerts a powerful effect on test scores. Not only did a lot of these kids see what you're administering because they read upside down, which Lita Hollingworth wrote about, and we have seen, we say that one of the qualities you have to work for us is the ability to read upside down. But not only that, they read you. You have to be careful that they're not reading your mind. If you're thinking the right answer, they'll come out with it. So you have to be thinking about other things, but you also have to like the kid. Just like if they don't respond to a teacher who doesn't like them, they don't respond to a tester who doesn't like them. I believe that all good testers are qualitative assessors. They're using their own rich background and experience about what kids are all about to add to what they understand. Experienced evaluators of gifted children combine quantitative data with qualitative information. They're looking at how does this child hold the pencil. They're looking at how long it takes for the child to reflect. They obtain a comprehensive picture of that child from many sources. So here are some of the sources of information that can be used to look at how this child is doing. Clinical observation, or watching them during the test, talking with the child, interviewing the parents, analysis of developmental milestones, family history, and previous records. Whenever a child's been tested before, I always look at what was the pattern before, what's the pattern now, and I'll superimpose the scores and show the parents where it went up, where it went down, and we try to figure out why. I often will say, is there any known IQ scores in the family background? Because I'm finding that even a grandparent's IQ can be a pretty good prediction of where that child's going to fall and what kind of supplemental instruments we might have to use. Documented IQ scores of parents, siblings, or other relatives, parental anecdotes of unusually advanced reasoning, that's always a good one. I had a child, I was training a new tester, and the child took the WIPSI and got a 127. And I read the child's developmental history. I said, this can't be possible. And the tester was really confused, and she said, why not? I said, you read the developmental history, and you tell me why this is not the child's IQ score. And she was grabbing at trying, because she was new to the process, she wasn't quite sure what it was I was picking up on. But the child read at 3 years old, and there were many other of these very advanced developmental things that were in the parent questionnaire. The thought process or the expressive abilities and how the child interacts with you is another clue. And unusual strengths or abilities that are shown at any age. When we retested that child on a Stanford Binet, the child had a 183.
Wow.
127 on a WIPSI, 183 on a Binet. But I knew from the parent questionnaire, just from the developmental milestones. So you look for signs of giftedness. Early progression through the development milestones, unusual curiosity, deep moral concern, remarkable associations, and generalizations, perfectionism. Gifted kids are perfectionistic. Keen attention to detail. They notice things. Passionate interest, profound empathy, vivid imagination, superb memory, early reading or fascination with Legos, high achievement, sophisticated reading interests. Reading interests are often a giveaway. Extraordinary capability with computers. And then the environmental factors. A lot of kids who are gifted, especially 8 and 9-year-old girls, know that if they get a certain score on this test, they're going to be separated from their friends. And they'll sit there and say, I don't know, and you know they know, and you know they're not going to tell you. So choosing to hide their abilities is a real issue with some gifted kids who are afraid of the consequences. Fear of failure, unwillingness to guess, anxiety with evaluation, discomfort with the examiner, or discomfort with flickering lights or too much noise. When I was teaching 6th grade, I had a brilliant student in my class, and that we've remained friends ever since. And I sent him to the psychologist to be tested. This was in like 1962 in California. There was a tiny room. The psychologist smoked a cigarette the entire time he was testing this kid. I couldn't figure out why his IQ score didn't come out as high as I thought it would. It wasn't even in the gifted range. He ended up on the GRE getting almost 1,600. But his IQ score with that examination wasn't so high. Selecting an IQ test. An appropriate IQ test for the gifted should be an excellent measure of abstract reasoning. Tests that emphasize working memory, processing speed, non-meaningful material are likely to produce less relevant results for this population. That's something I'm still fighting with the test constructors. The head of Pearson doesn't get it. He really thinks working memory and processing speed are what giftedness is all about. And abstract reasoning is just hothousing of parents of the gifted. Look for a test with a high ceiling. The higher the ceiling, the more room there is for the child to show ability. So, what is intelligence? We hear in the press so many things that make us think, A, there is no such thing, or B, no one is in agreement about what it is. There's multiple intelligences, or everybody's got the same intelligence, or there's no differences. We hear all kinds of misinformation about this topic. But there was a wonderful book by Snyderman and Rothman called The IQ Controversy. They actually did a poll of experts in the field of intelligence, and the amount of agreement was shocking. 99.3% of these experts said intelligence is abstract thinking or abstract reasoning. That's exactly the same definition that Louis Terman used when he created the Stanford Binet Intelligence Scale in 1916. So they agree with Terman. Problem-solving ability, 97.7 agreement. Capacity to acquire knowledge, 96% agreement. Now it gets a little less agreement. Memory, all right, taking pi and seeing how many, to what degree you can memorize the pi. That's nice, but what if one kid has a photographic memory? Nobody else can compete with that child. Adaptation to one's environment. That was Binet's view of it. Mental speed, not everybody agrees with. Experts who study intelligence are not in agreement that how fast you are indicates how smart you are. Linguistic competence, mathematical competence, general knowledge. Some people say creativity, but that's not what the experts are saying. And then sensory acuity is what the very first IQ test developed by Sir Francis Galton was all about sensory acuity. And he found, after testing like 1,800 people, that males were superior to females in every respect. But it was a test of sensory ability. Where did that fall? Only 24% of those experts thought that. Now, how many of you heard the term task commitment? Task commitment is giftedness and task commitment go together. Task commitment is one of the factors that we use to determine if a child's gifted, not according to the experts on intelligence. Only 24% of them thought goal-directedness was anything. And how about high achievement scores being how you know giftedness? By high achievement, look at this. It was at the bottom of the barrel. Only 18.9% of the experts thought achievement motivation was related to intelligence. Now, what does that do to all our high achieving programs out there, folks? It says we're off base. So let me give you some of the data that we're using at our center to make our decisions, because some of the decisions that we make at the Gifted Development Center affect policy. And now, thank goodness, we have the ear of the testing industry, so they listen to us. Not so good sometimes, and implementing even less, but they're at least listening. Verbal Comprehension Index was the highest in a group of 63 kids in the technical manual, 63 gifted kids. Perceptual reasoning, 120. Working memory, 112. Processing speed index, 110. Full scale IQ, 123.5. Make a mental picture of this, because you're going to see it again in another form in the next slides. So we did some assessments when the WISC-4 first came out of 103 gifted children, and we compared our assessments to the norms in the manual for gifted kids. For our kids, verbal comprehension was first, well, in the gifted range, 131.7. Perceptual reasoning was second, 126.4, superior. Working memory was also higher, 117 is in the high average range. But take a look at processing speed. The kids who come to our center got even a lower score on processing speed than the norm sample. And this is also interesting. Both scores are in the average range. 2 samples of gifted kids. What does that tell you about the importance of processing speed in measuring giftedness? Okay, means of the WISC-4 indices in relation to the control group that's in the WISC-4 manual. So the control group is coming from all over the United States. Verbal comprehension for the control group is 106, that should be in the average range. Perceptual reasoning, 105. Working memory, 103. Processing speed, 102. Our population at the Gifted Development Center was 2 standard deviations above in verbal comprehension, which is what they should be. Superior in perceptual reasoning, maybe 1 standard deviation above, 1.5. Working memory, a little above. Look at processing speed. The same as the control group of average kids. If you had to pick one index out of the WISC to determine who should get into the gifted program, which do you think you would choose?
Verbal.
Verbal Comprehension Index predicts achievement in a gifted program. And you can see why. Processing speed does not. So these were the subtests of the 63 kids. Vocabulary is the top where it belongs, it always is there. Look at arithmetic. In that group of 63, it ranks second. That's why we use arithmetic, one of the reasons we use it. Coding, which is the eye-hand coordination and speed, all the way down to the bottom, 11.5. But vocabulary was their highest, and then arithmetic, then similarities. All parts of an IQ test are not of equal value in determining giftedness. And this is my firm belief I know I am in an era where I'm looked at as a dinosaur because we don't believe in G anymore. G is dead. We can't kill G, but we believe G is dead. This is the era of multiple intelligences. This is the era of crystallized and fluid abilities and all these CF and C this and C that. Guess what? I want to know the minute a test comes out, what are the G loadings? The G loadings tell me everything I want to know because G stands for gifted. General intelligence is what I'm looking for in a subtest. Subtests with the richest loadings on general intelligence are the most useful in locating gifted children. Spearman's G represents giftedness. It is synonymous with abstract reasoning abilities, which the experts say is the essence of giftedness. So let's take a look at those WISC-4 subtests and the degree to which they measure G. Vocabulary, 0.82. Information, 0.79. Why I think information needs to be one of the ones we consider giving. Similarities is at the same level, 0.79. That's why I said to you, similarities and vocabulary on that first profile were very important because they're richly loaded in general intelligence. Arithmetic, look why I give arithmetic. Look at its G loading. It's measuring giftedness, and we're not giving it because it's an optional test. Word reasoning, now it's not in parentheses. The optional tests are in parentheses. And the reason it's not is that for us it's not an optional test. It's a core test. Word reasoning, 0.70, comprehension, 0.70. What do you notice, if you know anything at all about testing, what do you notice about which subtests have the richest loading in general intelligence?
The verbal.
Verbal comprehension subtest. Vocabulary, information, similarities, word reasoning, and comprehension. That's verbal comprehension. Arithmetic is the only one in the group that's not part of verbal comprehension. And that's why verbal comprehension predicts performance in a gifted program. Now, I'm a big fan of visual spatial learners. I wrote the book on it. I developed the concept. But when it comes to IQ testing, as good as we've gotten about measuring visual spatial abilities, they don't rank as high on general intelligence as the verbal. What does this mean? This means that if you're using the Naglieri nonverbal abilities test to pick your gifted kids, those are